15 years after her 9-year-old son disappeared, Laura Bennett had stopped believing she would ever see him again. Then, on a rainy November night in Boston, a complete stranger saved her life, and around his neck was something that belonged to her missing son.
15 years after her 9-year-old son disappeared, Laura Bennett had stopped believing she would ever see him again. Then, on a rainy November night in Boston, a complete stranger saved her life. And around his neck was something that belonged to her missing son. Laura was 47 and managed a small home goods store. That night, she left work late. Rain covered the parking lot, and as Laura hurried toward her car, her foot slipped near the exit lane. She fell. When she looked up, headlights were approaching. Before she could move, a young delivery driver nearby rushed toward her, helped her away from the lane, and brought her safely to the sidewalk. Laura was shaken, but unharmed. The young man picked up her bag and handed it back. His name was Ethan Cole. He was 24. Laura thanked him. But as Ethan turned toward his van, she noticed the silver pendant around his neck. A tiny compass. Laura froze. 15 years earlier, she had bought 2 identical compass necklaces. One for herself and one for her son, Adam. Adam had been wearing his the day he disappeared. Laura almost called after Ethan, but she stopped. It had to be a coincidence. That night, Laura opened an old wooden box she had kept hidden in her closet. Inside were photographs, childhood drawings, and her silver compass. She held it in her hand. It looked exactly like Ethan's. 4 days later, Ethan unexpectedly walked into Laura's store to make another delivery. This time, Laura started a casual conversation. Ethan told her he had grown up in Vermont with a man named Robert Cole. Then Laura asked about his childhood. Ethan admitted something strange. He remembered almost nothing before he was about 9 years old. Laura's expression changed. Adam had been 9 when he disappeared. Then Ethan reached across the counter. His sleeve moved back. Laura saw a small, curved scar near his left wrist. When Adam was 6, he had fallen from an old wooden fence. It left a scar in exactly the same place. Now Laura had 4 things she couldn't explain: the necklace, the age, the missing memories, and the scar. That night, Laura searched for Robert Cole. Eventually, she found an old photograph of him. She recognized his face. Years earlier, Robert had worked at the same engineering company as Laura's former husband, Daniel. This was no longer just a coincidence. Laura contacted Ethan and told him everything. She told him about Adam, the disappearance, the necklace, the scar. Ethan struggled to believe her. He had grown up believing his biological mother had died when he was young. Laura didn't ask him to believe her. She asked him to take a DNA test. Ethan agreed. Days later, the result arrived. Laura opened it alone. Probability of maternity, greater than 99.9%. Ethan Cole was Adam Bennett. Her missing son was alive. 15 years after disappearing, Adam had returned to his mother's life without either of them recognizing the other. And before they knew the truth, he had saved her. But one question remained. Who took Adam? On the day he disappeared, Adam had been with his father, Daniel. Laura and Daniel had recently gone through a difficult divorce. Daniel told police Adam disappeared from a crowded public park after he looked away for only a short time. Police searched. Volunteers searched. There were posters and possible sightings. Adam was never found. Laura had spent 15 years wondering whether Daniel knew more than he admitted. Now, Ethan wanted to see him. Laura placed an old photograph of Daniel in front of him. Ethan stared at it. Something changed in his expression. Then he said, "That isn't the man who took me." Laura froze. Ethan couldn't remember everything about that day. But he remembered one thing clearly. Someone else had led him away. Investigators reopened the case. They traced Robert Cole's life and discovered another name: Sarah Cole. When Laura saw her photograph, she immediately recognized her. Sarah was Daniel's half-sister, Adam's aunt. And slowly, the truth emerged. After Laura and Daniel separated, Sarah became convinced Laura was trying to remove Adam from Daniel's family. So Sarah made a terrible decision. Without Daniel's knowledge, she took Adam and left Massachusetts. Later, she began a new life with Robert Cole. But Robert didn't know the truth. Sarah told him the boy belonged to a relative who could no longer care for him. Adam became Ethan. Years passed. His early memories faded. Then Sarah died while Ethan was still young. Robert continued raising him, never knowing that a mother in Boston was still searching. But there was one more truth Laura wasn't prepared for. Daniel had never stopped looking for Adam. After the official investigation slowed, Daniel continued searching on his own. He followed leads across different cities and spent much of his savings trying to find his son. He had even begun to suspect someone in his own family. But he never discovered the truth. 3 years before Laura found Ethan, Daniel died. He never knew his son was alive. Weeks later, Laura and Ethan visited Daniel's grave. For the first time, Ethan understood that his father had never abandoned him. He had spent the rest of his life searching. Then Ethan removed the silver compass from around his neck. Robert had always told him it came from his mother. Now Ethan knew the truth. Sarah hadn't given it to him. Robert hadn't given it to him. Adam had already been wearing it when he disappeared. Laura reached into her coat and removed her own matching compass. 15 years earlier, a mother and her son had worn those 2 necklaces. One stayed in Boston. The other disappeared with a 9-year-old boy. Ethan gently placed his compass beside his father's grave. For 15 years, Laura had imagined how she might find her son. A police officer at her door, a phone call, a detective finally finding the missing clue. She never imagined Adam would return as a stranger. She didn't recognize him. He didn't recognize her. But before either of them knew the truth, when Laura needed someone to reach out and save her, her son was already there. Sometimes the person you've spent years searching for doesn't return the way you imagined. Sometimes he simply reaches out his hand.